Hi second graders, Mrs. Shook again with our grade 2 skills, unit 1, lesson 3. Let's get started. Our goals for today, we're going to be able to read and make the following letter sounds: k, g, f, v, l, h, I, and a. Some of them are review from last time. We're going to be able to blend, segment, and spell one-syllable words with the vowel sounds a, I, and a. We're going to be able to read a shared text like we've been doing, and then answer questions based on that text. Okay, for review, when we hear a, we know that it will be the letter A all the time. When we hear I, we know that most of the time it will be letter I, like in it. When we hear a, we know that most of the time it will be spelled letter E. When we hear a, we know that sometimes it will be spelled with a U, but there are other spellings. When we hear a, we know that it will usually be spelled with the letter O. When we hear the consonant sound P, we know that most of the time it's a single letter P. When we hear B, we know that most of the time it's a single letter B, like in bat. When we hear the letter sound T, we know that most of the time it will be a single letter T, like in top. When we hear the sound D, we know that most of the time it will be a single letter D, as in the word dot. Okay, and for the sound K, we know that one of the more common ways to spell it is with the letter C, like in cat. For the sound G, like in gift, we know that the most common ways to spell it is the single letter G. Okay, our first new letter sound for today is we have consonants today. What letter do you see here in red? Very good. Letter K, as in kid. Now, if we look at our power bar, it's pretty small, so it tells us there's a lot of other ways to make this sound. So we already have cat, which is our most common way. Now we're adding, we already have C from cat, which is our most common spelling. Now we're adding letter K, as in kid, which is the next most common spelling for K. Alright, next we have letter F for the word fit, to make the F sound. And our power bar tells us this is one of the more common ways to spell the F sound. Adding it to our chart, single letter F is the most common way to spell the sound F. Next we have letter V, as in vet. The letter V is one of the most common spellings for the sound vet. Adding it to our chart. Okay, this is the letter L. Not to be confused with an I. It's the letter L. Lip. Lip. So, based on our power bar, the L sound is most often spelled with the single letter L. Lip. L. Okay, and now we have letter H for the sound like in hot. Our power bar is full. We know that there's only one spelling for the sound. It's the letter H. Okay, now our individual code chart to add all of our new sounds. We have our old sounds already in red. Today you're going to add the new sounds also in red. Again, write them out if you don't have your code chart. If not, just add them to your own. So we're adding the K for K for kid. We're adding for the sound F, the letter F. For the sound V, the letter V. For the sound O, the letter L. And for the sound the letter H. This is on page 2, 3, and 5 in your individual code chart. Okay, now that we've finished reviewing and learning our letter sounds for today, we're going to use those letter sounds to change some words. The first word I want to put on the screen is kid. So let's sound it out. K-I-D, kid. K-I-D, k. I think it's going to be the letter K. Very good. I know, is letter I, and D is D, kid, K-I-D. Okay, let's take off the K, add an L, L-I-D, lid. Take off the I, add an A, L-A-D, lad. Taking off the D, adding a G, lag, lag. Taking away the A, adding an O, log, log. Taking off the L, changing it to a J, jog, jog. Take off the O, add a U, now we have jog, jug. Taking off the G, adding a T, now we have jut, jut. Taking away the U, we add an E, jet, jet. Taking off the J, adding a V, and we end with vet, vet. Very good. Okay, our next word, lap, L-A-P. How would we spell lap? L-A-P, lap. All right, let's start chaining our word. Take off the P, add a D. Now we have lad. Taking off the L, making it an H. Had, add, had. Changing the A to an I. Id, hid. Changing the H to a B. B-id, bid. Changing the I to an E. B-ed, bed. Changing the D to a G. Beg, b-e-g, beg. Taking away the E, changing it to a U. That gives us b-a-g, bug. Taking away the B, making it an H, h-a-g, hug. And changing the H to an L, we will end with l-a-g, log. Great job sounding out and spelling our words. Okay, now we are going to practice some dictation again, which means I will read you a word and you will write the word down. We'll practice one together, and then there will be 3 more on your Google Forms at the end. And as always, you can refer to your individual code chart to help you with any letter sounds. Okay, our word is fog. In the morning, it's hard to see because of all of the fog. Fog. Alrighty, once you have your word written, we're going to go over it. So, fog. F-A-G. We hear 3 sounds. Our first sound, F, we know is letter F. A is an O, and G is a G. Let's see. F-O-G. F-A-G. Fog. Great job. Okay, now we're done with that portion of the lesson and we're on to reading. So far we've read about Kate and Nan. Kate went to visit her Nan in the West. They went camping with Jake and Max. And now we're on part 3 of the story called The Hike. Okay, our purpose for reading is to find out what Max and Kate find on their hike. Here's our story for today. Our vocabulary word, cliff, a high, steep surface of rock. You kind of see the cliff in the picture behind them. It's really high and steep. And on the next page, you can't see it, but our other vocab word is bone. We know that bones are the hard parts inside of a person or an animal. Expert, someone who knows a lot about a specific thing. So an expert will tell you a lot of information about something that they know a lot about. Okay, and reading together. As always, if I point to you, try to read with me. I will always read the whole story, and you are welcome to read the whole story with me. Okay, the hike. The next morning, we went on a hike. After a bit, we stopped for lunch. When Max finished his lunch, he asked, "Can Kate and I look for rocks by ourselves?" Jake said, "Okay." "Kate," Max said to me, "bring your fork. We can use it to dig up rocks." I grabbed my fork and we went off to look for rocks. So they have a fork to look for rocks with. Max pointed at a bump on the side of a cliff and said, "Let's dig that rock out." The rock did not look all that large. But when we started digging, we soon saw that it was larger than it had seemed. After a bit, Max said, "Gee, it must be 2 feet long. We've got to keep scratching." We went on scratching with our forks. "Let's tug on it," Max said. We grabbed it and gave a big tug. It popped out, but so did a big cloud of sand and dust. Max and I fell down. Once the dust and sand had drifted off, I saw Max standing there with a thing in his hands. "It's not a rock," he yelled. "It's a bone." It was the biggest bone I had ever seen. It was 3 feet long. Jake and Nan came running. "Goodness," said Nan, "that is one large bone. Where did you get it?" Max pointed to the spot where we found it. Jake set the bone on the ground. Then he took a picture of the bone and said, "We need to get an expert to look at this bone and tell us what sort of bone it is." All right, so in the hike, Max and Kate took their forks to go look for rocks, and they ended up finding a 3-foot bone. So they're going to get a hold of an expert and see what kind of bone it really is. I wonder what kind it might be. Make a prediction in your head, and when we read tomorrow, we'll find out what kind of bone they found. Okay, so for our questions, as always, we're going to do question 1 together, and the rest will be on your Google Forms. Question 1. What did Kate and Max want to look for? A. Kate and Max wanted to look for lunch. B. Kate and Max wanted to look for forks. Or C. Kate and Max wanted to look for rocks. Okay, remember in the story, they were eating lunch and they asked if they could go look for something. If they were already eating lunch, they were not looking for lunch. They were looking for something. Were they looking for forks or were they looking for rocks? Let's see. When Max finished lunch, he asked, "Can Kate and I look for rocks by ourselves?" And if we remember, they took their forks with them, so they weren't looking for forks. They wanted to look for rocks. So C is the correct choice. All right. And like I said, you're going to answer the rest of the questions in your Google Forms, Skills Unit 1, Lesson 3. On the Google form, just as before, you're going to type the words I say in the recording. You can always use your individual code chart to help you. Here are all the letters and sounds that we have done so far. Pages 2, 3, 5, and 7. Here is the story. And to end off, great work today. Make sure when you're answering your questions, you're using your resources. You can look back at the story. You can use your individual code chart. Great work today. Have a good day.